Hello again everybody, and turning away from the world of letters and the light they give us on the classical world, I'm going to think today about the topical day of Pentecost, being as today, when I'm recording this, is Whit Sunday in 2020. So Pentecost under lockdown, an interesting experience altogether. So why is it called Whit Sunday first of all? Well, it's probably a corruption of White Sunday. And that comes about because it was traditional for there to be quite a lot of baptisms around the time of Pentecost. And so it was traditional for people who were going to be baptised to be wearing white, and so it became called White Sunday. It's also kind of hitched onto some pagan spring festivals which are still commemorated in different ways. One of those is in the traditional dance of England, the Morris dance, and it's a big time when Morris dancing would normally be happening, but this time sadly not. Perhaps more distantly related are the traditional Whit walks in northern towns, in Pennine towns especially, where you get the local town or the village brass band marching through and then all going to the pub, and those might have originated, in partly at least, in showing off the new Whit Sunday suit, because it was the traditional time to get your new suit for the year. Either way, there was lots of drinking. The first Pentecost was somewhat different. I'm going to look at this from a classical point of view, although it actually connects quite well to some of Cicero's reflections on tyranny, which I talked about yesterday and which I do commend to you. Anyway, this is the account of the first Pentecost as it's recorded by St. Luke in the book of the Acts of the Apostles. While the day of Pentecost was running its course, they were all, that is the disciples, together in one place, when suddenly there came from the sky a noise like that of a strong driving wind, which filled the whole house where they were sitting. There appeared to them tongues like flames of fire, dispersed among them and resting on each one. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to talk to each other in tongues as the Spirit gave them power of utterance. Now there were living in Jerusalem devout Jews drawn from every nation under heaven, and at this sound the crowd gathered, all bewildered because each one heard his own language spoken. They were amazed, and in their astonishment exclaimed, "Why, they're all Galileans, are they not, these men who are speaking? How is it then that we hear them, each of us in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, inhabitants of Mesopotamia, of Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, the districts of Libya around Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them telling in our own tongues the great things God has done." And they were all amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What can this mean?" Others said contemptuously, "They've been drinking." So that seems to connect a little bit with Whit Sunday traditions there, although entirely by accident. Anyway, it goes on and it tells of how St. Peter and the other apostles really started preaching the word about the crucifixion and then the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So, first of all, we've got the disciples sitting together in Jerusalem, not knowing what to do. They were very depressed. There'd been the excitement of the years of preaching, following Jesus, and they now all those years seem to have been wasted, foolish and misguided, ending in the brutal crucifixion of their leader. And then the Holy Spirit appeared to them. And now the language used for this is remarkably similar to Virgil Aeneid Book 2, when Aeneas, the son of Aeneas, is similarly anointed with the sound of a rushing mighty wind and tongues of fire playing around his head. So maybe this is a biblical account using familiar classical imagery, which says whoever has got flames playing around their head, they are clearly chosen by God. Either way, the effect on the disciples, as it was on those who witnessed Aeneas, was profound. So whatever the prompting, it made a big difference. They then began to preach openly, and perhaps this, ironically, is answering the challenge set by Cicero, although it's unlikely they'd have ever heard of that, but the idea of challenging tyranny. So there's a huge range of nationalities in Jerusalem, and that's one of the things I find interesting about this account. It's interesting because it's Jews who came from all those places, plus possibly some merchants, and St. Luke also mentions some proselytes, Jewish converts. They almost certainly spoke Greek because that was the international language of the Eastern Mediterranean. But it says in Acts that they understood in their own languages. What a polyglot place Jerusalem must have been, a bit like Alexandria maybe. This was the beginning of the Christian church, really. It became the time of baptisms. It was said in a little later on in the account that there perhaps 3,000 were baptized on that first day, and then the disciples began, and the followers of the way began to share their possessions. Now this was a massive challenge to the tyranny of Roman occupation, and perhaps to the leadership of the Jewish hierarchy too. It's certainly an answer to Cicero's questions about how to respond to tyranny. So Cicero asked about, should we use words in opposition or should we use violence? Well, clearly the apostles felt you should preach, you should seek to persuade. There's no evidence of any sanction for violence here, so Cicero would have approved of that. But there's, interestingly, questioning of private property. And it establishes here, for the first time that I'm aware of in human history, the notion of from each according to his ability, so to each in his need. Now this is ultimately the origin of some pretty radical politics, even one of the central tenets of Marxism. Not quite the image on the birthday of the Church of the Church of England being the Tory party at prayer. The earliest church was a great deal more radical and challenging to tyranny than that.